How to lose. I think we can all agree that team games are a lot. Don't even get me started on trying to win team games, because how dare you? You will flail pointlessly like a fish out of water, and you will like it. 5 times in a row, in fact, and D-rank, and you will do it with a smile. One thing that makes losing extra spicy is when you realize after 2 team fights that you're actually fucked for the next 15 minutes. And then you have the distinct pleasure of watching the inevitable carry out its will in slow, agonizing motion. Because the reality is, there are actual children playing this game too, literally and mentally. It's one of the only spaces where fully grown adults and prepubescent children can end up on the same team working towards the same goal. It's kind of cute when the goal is a jigsaw puzzle, but in Overwatch, it's war. Can you imagine taking your position in a war, and when you look to your right, there's a 12-year-old raised by a tablet holding an AR? That's your lookout. That's the person you have to depend on to give you cover fire when you advance. If you advance. And if you've any sanity, morality, or willpower left, you might try to protect them. You might choose to believe in them and be their cover fire instead. But you don't. You've lost 3 wars in a row, and this is your last war for the night. 12-year-olds in each of them. Then, when it seems that defeat is certain, you remember drives are active and swap on over to Doomfist, because if you're gonna lose, you're gonna have some fun while you do it. Losing sucks. It just does. At times it can feel like you're being set up to fail, and sometimes you are. 1/3 of the time, it turns out. It's just the way it works. Trying to solve for a fair match with a population this large is an extraordinarily complicated process. There are so many variables and inconsistencies between win or loss, but in the end, it's the only metric that can effectively sort all of us into a game that feels like you have a chance to win. Emphasis on chance, but we'll come back to that later. The cherry on top of losing a war in slow motion is that when you press tab, you can see the stats of your teammates, their eliminations, their deaths, and the amount of damage, healing, or mitigation they've contributed to the war effort. In an instant, you can see who's struggling. You can spot the weakest link, or so it seems. You see, most players at the medal ranks I oscillate between assume that if your stats are high, you're playing well, and if they're low, you're playing poorly. This is true in some cases, but is absolutely false in others. Why? Free will. Some would say we have it, others would say we don't, and though the arguments for both are pretty interesting, the fact remains that in a lobby with 10 random people in it, there are a lot of ways that you can do a whole lot of nothing, even if you've got a ton of damage and elims, even healing. Ain't that something? I mean, sure, the numbers are there, but competitive Overwatch doesn't care about your stats. It cares about the war. Scoring elims is simply a means to complete an objective. Seems obvious, but if you actually play this game, you know how rarely it's prioritized, even by the best of the best. The goal of the game is to take and hold space to complete the objective. And if you have to blow someone up to make that happen, you do it, but your priority is always going to be moving your payload from point A to point B. Doesn't matter how you do it, just that you do it. When you press tab, you don't get to see how much of that damage actually got the payload moving. None of those numbers directly tell you who's targeting the biggest threats and enabling the team to actually win the game. The only thing that tells you that you've done something right is when you see that payload reach the other side of the map, which is what makes the game so brilliant in my eyes. you can absolutely win the war without more than a couple casualties. When I first started playing this game, I didn't know shit about fuck. That hasn't changed, but I can confidently say I've grasped some of the basics, and I'm beginning to think critically about the war. When I first started playing, I'd win some games and lose most games, but in both cases, I was blissfully unaware of why. I hadn't grasped the larger concept of the war. It took me a minute. I wasn't beating myself up for throwing games and not knowing why, though. I just kept trying. I was having fun, and I was getting better. A process that we're all engaging with, whether we accept it or not. If I could give myself that grace, what was stopping me from giving it to others? Dickheads, idiots, chatty, passive-aggressive, loud and wrong dickheads. Let's circle back to chance. On its face, Overwatch doesn't look like a game of chance, but at some point in life, reality will force you to look beyond the face of things. It will force you to think critically about how ideas are presented to you and the mechanisms behind the presentation. Overwatch is often presented as a rather complicated game, but I disagree. It is multi-dimensional for sure, but it isn't all that complex. To me, part of the genius of the game is in its ability to simplify the goal for 10 often completely random people at a time. That's not easy work, but they get it done. How? Well, put simply, they hedge bets. That modifier you see after some of your matches tells you what the algorithm was betting on. An uphill battle meant you overcame the odds, and expected means exactly that. And if I'm honest, seeing that consolation modifier when it's clear that my DPS partner was indeed 12, literally or mentally, gives me some solace. Just enough to keep my attachment to this wonderful, sometimes utterly dreadful game nice and healthy. That's a good thing. No one has a 100% win rate. No one ever will. And yet, we queue again because slowly but surely, we learn how to win. But that can only happen once we know how to lose. Here's how I do it. First, accept that your lobby is constructed based on chance. The algorithm is attempting to create a fair game. What is a fair game? When the odds of victory are roughly 50%. Anyone's game. Even when it feels unfair, it makes up for this to the best of its ability. Life itself isn't fair, so why would we expect our highly variable competitive games to be? If you can't accept that sometimes you're the only adult in the room, and try anyway, go play a fighting game. Seriously, you're not gonna make it. There are plenty of one-on-one options out there. I find them pretty therapeutic when I'm on a tilt bender. But that's the thing. One-on-one games force you to face yourself. There's no one else to blame. Which brings us to the next step. Face yourself. Don't let the stats of an underperforming or a perpetually out-of-position teammate blind you to the fact that you're aware of the issue and didn't attempt to solve it. In war, if you're not the solution to the problem, you're an accomplice, especially if you can see what's missing. Is it fair that you have to do twice as much DPS with no healing into a team with all the healing and 2 aimbots? No. But if a third of your matches are like this on average, what choice do you have? Does it make any sense to yell back at the 12-year-old clearly struggling with object permanence and self-control, especially when you can block them with 2 clicks and possibly hyper carry your way to victory? Is it fair that you have to hyper carry? No. But guess what? Another third of your matches will be on the other side. where you inevitably run the enemy team back to spawn and keep them there in humiliating fashion, watching them all spiral out in the chat and spamming your favorite voice lines. See, everything's better now. Nowadays, if my team is being spawn camped and no one leaves, it's a chance to practice Hanzo, dude. It's my shot to take a chance and hedge my bets on a couple of headshots and some breathing room. That's it. It's not an indictment of my worth as a human being or my intelligence, God forbid. And it's certainly not a chance to try to get even with some preteen who probably can't read very well, let alone pay attention long enough to give a fuck. When it's clear that victory is very likely out of reach, the game changes. Now the question is, can I get us out of spawn? And the process of thinking outside of the box in these instances can actually expand your roster. I can't count how many games I was able to save because Sombra wasn't banned. I only started playing Sombra because there was nothing else left to try. Now, she's a highly effective tool I can pull out occasionally to steal a win in spectacular fashion. It's a loss, but it doesn't have to be hell. It only becomes that when we let it. And much like so many of us in the real world, we suffer because we've allowed what could be play to be work. Can you learn to have fun when you know you're gonna lose? Can you find it? Can you accept what's in front of you and make the best out of it no matter what it looks like? If so, my friend, you know how to lose. And once you know how to lose, you win. That's why we're here in the first place, right? So good luck and have fun. I'll see you next week.